Okay, everybody, I guess we'll get started. Thank you for being here. The governor just completed his final State of the State speech. It was a long one, and it's been a long 8 years. So, let me begin by saying that the governor and I are friends. We don't agree on a lot of things, but I think he tried really hard while he was here. And there were things that I think he did that were good for the state. The pension payments were one of them, making the full pension payments. But when it comes to being stronger and fairer, you have to ask that question, for who? Who is it stronger and fairer for today? Who is it more stronger and fairer for today than it was 8 years ago? We've got a budget that has increased $22 billion. We've got property taxes on average now today that are up over $10,000 a home. Unemployment taxes are up. Payroll taxes up, right? More and more people in New Jersey are living paycheck to paycheck. The homeless rate is skyrocketing. These are all things that should be sending a warning sign to us. But yet last night, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, along with the governor, signed a bill adding another $128 million to a budget that is already estimated to be $4 billion shortfall, a $4 billion structural deficit, and they are still spending in the final hours of this administration. That is all going to fall on the tax of the taxpayers. It is all going to fall on the backs of the taxpayers. So I ask you, stronger and fairer for who? And that's the question that I think all New Jerseyans have to ask themselves. Utility rates are going up, and there's no end in sight to that. PJM just had another auction. The price went up dramatically again. No end in sight for that. Last night, we passed a bill, the final hours of the session, to eliminate the requirement to find the savings in the state health benefits program. So the state health benefits program is going to continue to skyrocket. So I ask you again, stronger and fairer for who? And that's the concern that I have here. As the new administration begins, I know Governor-elect Cheryl, our communities, many of the communities that she represented and I represent, overlap. She represented them in the federal government, and I represented them in the state government. We've found issues and common ground to work together on. We haven't agreed on everything either, but we work together. But she is coming in, make no mistake, at a very difficult time. And the real hurdle for her is going to be this first budget. That's where the rubber is going to meet the road. But make no mistake, I think all of us here want her to succeed. Because if she succeeds, New Jersey succeeds. But there is a lot of work to do here. There's a lot of work to do here. And I think we as Republican leaders in the Senate and the Assembly are hopeful to be a part of that process. Because for the last 4 years, we haven't been. Our ideas and suggestions to lower the taxes, to make it more affordable here, to help in education funding, have all been ignored. quite frankly, there hasn't been a lot of transparency in this administration. Not only with us, but for the press as well. Budgets that were hammered out in the final hours in the dark of night when the budget wasn't even on paper, but yet had to be voted on. You didn't find out where the spending was till weeks or months later. That's no way to run a state. So I'm concerned. I'm concerned for New Jersey, and I'm concerned for our residents, and I'm concerned for our children and grandchildren. Because we need to make New Jersey a place where people want to live, work, and raise a family. And right now, I think we're teetering on the edge. And I don't think in the last 22 years that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have had control, that we've seen one year better than the last. And that's not a good thing for New Jersey. I'll turn it over to the minority leader in the Assembly, my good friend John DeMeo.
Thank you, Senator. Well, the governor laid out how he sees his legacy for his 8 years. I guess, what will people remember Phil Murphy for? Will they remember the record spending, up to $58 billion, $24.1 billion increase in 8 short years, 70% increase in spending? Maybe his despotic pandemic policies, more than 16,000 deaths in nursing homes and veterans nursing homes, which could have been avoided if they used a little common sense and put those folks into a place to cordon them off before they sent them back to the nursing home. Increased taxes and fees. Annual tax for a middle-class couple exceeds about $43,000 a year now, with a nearly 30% total tax burden, and property taxes alone are just skyrocketing. Affordability crisis. Cost of living has surged by over $32,000 in the last 8 years, a 45% increase. And the energy policy of that energy master plan has simply failed. We now produce 57% of our need. And when they force demand up and we don't have enough supply, we have to bring in from other places. Supply and demand is pretty simple economics. Prices are going to rise, and they have risen dramatically. Anyone in this room who lives in this state sees it every month in their electric bill. He bought it off with taxpayer dollars for a while, but now it's impacting all of us on the bill. And then he talks about the AI program. Well, that requires a lot of energy. We are not going to be able to move into any kind of significant data centers or AI programs in this state if we don't have energy to supply those facilities. The energy policy has simply failed. That's our most pressing issue in my mind, because if we start having brownouts and we don't get quickly moving, and I mentioned this before over in our reorg, if we don't get some energy back online, new plants being built and up and running in the next few years, we're going to have real serious problems with blackouts in this state. Real ID, only 17% of the residents had real ID by the deadline. Should have been rolled out much better. I could go on and on. He talked about New Jersey Transit that's never on time. People who ride that train every day understand that problem as part of his legacy. Learning loss due to the pandemic lockouts of our children from school. Inequitable school funding. And then they pass a bill that underfunded schools could raise property tax by 9.9% and put more burden on property taxpayers instead of properly funding all the schools in a fair and equitable process throughout the state of New Jersey. So people are going to continue to suffer these high property taxes, which are the most difficult to pay, because they're not based on your ability, as the income tax is, because they simply won't do what they need to do to fund schools in the proper manner. So his legacy is not as rosy as he put it. He's a great storyteller. He was a lot of fun to watch. We all had some good chuckles watching him. But the reality is, if you want to lay out a legacy, I think people are going to remember him for a lot more, a lot differently than he sees it. In fact, I just found out today that New Jersey's unemployment rate is a full 1% higher than the nation's average right now, which is going to start being felt in the tax revenue stream as well. So I'm going to turn it over to my conference leader right now, Krista Phillips, and I'm sorry, Senator. How about Senator
Age
Test?
before beauty.
There we go.
Sorry.
Thank you, Leader DeMaio. Where do we begin? You know, I've been in the legislature now a full 6 years, and the theme of every one of these State of the States is a stronger and fairer New Jersey. And I don't want to repeat what Leader Senator Bucco spoke about, but we have to engage in intellectual honesty here. And I really think it becomes a very Ronald Reagan-esque question: is New Jersey stronger and fairer than it was 8 years ago? And the answer is absolutely not. Go talk to your average person whether they feel that they are doing better today than they were 8 years ago in the state of New Jersey. And the large majority, the overwhelming majority of people would say absolutely not. I kept on hearing Governor Murphy talk about affordability and how New Jersey is more affordable. To who? You know, I sit on the Senate Budget and Appropriations Committee, and it's a privilege to sit there because you really get into the nooks and crannies of where all of the crazy spending happens in the state of New Jersey. Senator Bucco touched upon it. We have a $4 billion structural deficit. I don't envy Governor Sherrill at all. Eventually, we cannot keep kicking this can down the road. Someone is going to have to tighten the belt. It's just an unsustainable course of action to go from a $34 billion budget to an almost $59 billion budget. It's impossible. Senator O'Scanlan, myself, Senator Oraho before Senator O'Scanlan, spoke about some belt-tightening measures that could have been done. So while the theme of Governor Murphy's speech was stronger and fairer, I think the theme of our speeches should be, we told you so. We knew we were going to be here. We knew we were going to have an energy crisis. And when someone tells you who they are and what they're going to do, you should believe them. Governor Murphy promised us when he first ran for governor that he wanted to make New Jersey the California of the East Coast. He promised all of us that he was going to raise taxes by $2 billion in his first term. He did all of those things. And we're in danger now of having rolling brownouts. We adopted energy policies that were absolutely unsustainable and I would say insane. And the press has asked me in the past, they say, Senator Testa, what do you mean by insane? I said, look up the definition of insanity. It's impossible. You cannot shut production down and expect to have the same amount of energy that you once had. And by the way, keeping the costs either flat or lower them. People were calling our legislative offices in record numbers and emailing us in record numbers this past summer when energy bills went up. Why? Because they're very frustrated. In this past summer, we all love the Jersey Shore. Every one of us does. We love going to our beaches. People and families were making decisions as to whether they could afford to go for a week. And if they used to be able to afford to go for a week, now they're cutting it back to a weekend or just a day trip. Why? Because New Jersey isn't affordable. You know, you take a look at our corporate business tax. At its highest level, 11.5%. 11.5%. And this isn't a Republican policy or a Democrat policy. Look at Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania. He's cutting their corporate business tax. Why? Because he's letting people know that Pennsylvania is open for business. They are on a course to go to a 5% corporate business tax by 2030. New Jersey, we're at 11.5%. We just saw an iconic brewery, Anheuser-Busch. You can see it from the Turnpike in Newark. The beautiful Eagle getting taken down just over a week ago. We are losing business in the state of New Jersey. Why? Because instead of having sound policy, we have our governor listening to ideology that simply doesn't work. And he's pleasing the radical left, the far left of his party. But guess what? He's not pleasing New Jerseyans. When you talk to your average New Jerseyan, they say, what is happening to our state? They're looking for an exit. And who are the most mobile, by the way? Those millionaires that Governor Murphy referenced, they're the most mobile. They are the ones that can leave this state. Okay.
Go right there.
Is that my cue? That's my hook. Oh,
ironic.
it is, and thank God it's the end of an era, because I'm hoping that we can work with Governor Sherrill on sound policy, because our young people are very frustrated. They're graduating college at 22, living at home with mom and dad for an inordinate amount of time, and the average age for first-time home buyers in the state of New Jersey is 44 years old, and the average price of a home is over $550,000. So let me get this straight. You graduate from college at 22, and yet you have to wait another 22 years to be able to afford a home? Where are people going to go? They're not going to stay here. That's a horrible deal. Why would anybody accept that deal? They're going to say, I'm going to go someplace which is far more affordable, whether it's Pennsylvania, whether it's Tennessee, whether it's North Carolina or South Carolina. And take a look at North Carolina. Johnson & Johnson's one of our greatest companies in the state of New Jersey. They just built a $2 billion facility, $2 billion facility in North Carolina. Why? Because they could build it in under 3 years, and they said it would probably take them about 7 years to build it here in the state of New Jersey. We need to do far better to make New Jersey stronger and fair, because right now people are feeling weaker and poorer, and they're damn frustrated, and they've had enough. And it reminds me of that iconic movie. You could maybe pull that one up while we're at it, by the way. Yeah, please. Where people are mad as hell and they're not going to take it anymore. That's how most New Jerseyans feel. They are mad as hell and they're not going to take it anymore. Unfortunately, that didn't show up at the polls in November, and hopefully we can all work with the Sherrill administration to actually make a stronger and fair New Jersey, or better yet, New Jersey and you perfect together again. Thank you.
So I took notes because I like to be accurate. I don't want to misquote the governor. But stronger and fair, he mentioned it not once, not twice, 6 times. Nothing about cutting taxes. Nothing about cutting costs. He actually didn't say the word affordability once. He did make a cursory reference to a crisis in affordability, but no solutions whatsoever. Nothing about cutting the sales tax. Nothing about cutting property taxes. He talked about bringing property relief to New Jersey, but he did not cut property taxes. Nothing about income tax rate cuts. Nothing about corporate business tax cuts. Nothing about the energy crisis at all. Nothing about reducing electricity rates. Nothing about bringing down energy prices. That is our agenda here. That is what we're going to fight for. We've always fought for it, and we're going to fight for it in the new administration as well. So, we are living in an alternative universe compared to the governor. Stronger and fair, we don't agree. We're happy to take questions.
If things are this dire, any thoughts on why you can convince voters to put your party in charge?
Listen, this past election was really about national issues. I mentioned that this morning if you were at our reorg. The reality is people were voting because they were more angry with D.C., and that's the plain fact of the matter. When they have time to refocus on New Jersey and that this election's gone, they're going to have buyer's remorse probably within the next couple of years, because there's no way they're going to change. They have more and more progressive members in the caucus in our House that are going to want more and more money spent on foolish things rather than taking care of cutting the costs and making New Jersey more affordable. I mean, the senator mentioned North Carolina and Johnson & Johnson going there. I mean, yes, it was, the regulations were easier, they could get their projects done, but when you're talking about a 2% corporate business tax versus a 11.5, sorry, got the wrong number, 11.5% corporate business tax, that's like a cherry on top of that pie. I mean, why wouldn't people move their businesses there? So we're losing businesses as time goes on. It's trying to create the AI thing and other businesses, but yet we've destroyed our energy supply, and we're not going to be able to keep our businesses that we have here in power if we don't get off our duff and work together, both sides of the aisle, and come up with a common sense, logical energy plan versus the one that he put in on his own. And I blame the two leaders in the majority party for not having the legislature get involved with that energy master plan process over the last 7 years, rather than to let the governor act unilaterally and put us in such a weak position, because we're in competition with other states. Virginia, Loudoun County, has 10 data centers. They'll pay the rate. If she freezes the rates, it's not going to matter. Try going to the gas station tonight and tell me you want to pay $2 a gallon or $1.50 for gas and see if they sell it to you. The reality is, market rate is driven by supply and demand, and we've killed our supply. We need to work on that ASAP. This governor has royally failed on the energy policy of the state of New Jersey. We only produce 57% of our need.
I think that one of the things that people are going to look back on this administration and see it as an administration of missed opportunity, right? The governor talked about his dealing with COVID. And, you know, part of the reason that we were able to spend as much as we spent without having an even greater impact is because of all of the federal dollars that came in during that COVID crisis. If this governor had used that COVID funding, we could have made some real structural changes with that money to the budget. And that would have had lasting impact. But instead, we had budgets over the course of a couple of years that spent $3.5 billion more than the governor asked for. You know, that's where I think people, when they look back, they're going to say, you know what? We had the opportunity. We had the resources and the funding. It was here from the federal government. And if we would have used that to make some real structural changes, we could have really put New Jersey in a much better position for the future. But they didn't. They spent it on pork projects all over the state of New Jersey, but primarily in Democrat districts.
Any other questions?
Talked about some belt tightening measures. What would you like to see Cheryl tighten?
Well, Senator Bucco touched upon it, starting with the COVID money. We borrowed $4.6 billion that we didn't need. So it sort of was like, handing a child, your wallet and credit cards and saying, go have fun. And that's unfortunately what happened with the Murphy administration. Now, we have a $4 billion structural deficit. Where Governor Sherrill can really hone in on is that structural deficit. I mean, that's exactly what we need to get down. You have a $4 billion, no business, no home can operate with a significant deficit like that. And they talk about a surplus, but I call that mathematical gymnastics or accounting gymnastics, because think about this. You can't have a surplus if you have a structural deficit. Senator O'Scanlan has talked about this in our Budget and Appropriations Committee hearings multiple times. So have I. So has Senator Steinhardt. This is something that we have to take a long, hard look at to find out, how did we get here? Again, we all knew where we were going. We were on the road to perdition in a spending spree, and Senator Bucco talked about it in certain pet projects. The amount of pork in each and every one of these budgets. I've gotten myself in a little bit of trouble with the Murphy administration because I called it an orgy of pork at one point in time. And I gave a list of the hundreds of millions of dollars on pork projects that were completely unnecessary. But guess what? That's exactly where we can start tightening the belt in the budget. All of those pork projects that are completely unnecessary, that don't belong in our budget, that are, by the way, given to us at the 11th hour, if not the 12th hour. I mean, that's not the way to run a government, especially one that has a $59 billion budget. And again, that $4 billion structural deficit, that needs to be addressed on day one with a plan from the Sherrill administration.
We are going to reach a point where the governor's going to have to look at the budget in total. And she's going to have to make some hard decisions, and we're going to have to decide what the state of New Jersey has to do, what it would like to do, and what it can no longer afford to do. And that's really where we're headed. Because if we don't start to make these changes now, the crash that will occur is going to be incredible. Because think about this, right? The governor talked about the surplus, the rainy day fund that they've developed here in New Jersey. Utilize that $4 billion, utilize it to close the budget deficit. And now we have no rainy day fund. Right? Things continue to go up. And that's really scary when you start to think about that. Because the only other way you're going to close that deficit is either by making huge cuts to the budget or raising taxes, raising revenue. And that's really what Governor Murphy has done over the years, is continued to raise the revenue. And that's why the cost of living, and that's why everything becomes more expensive here in New Jersey. That's why the families are feeling it. You know, remember, they eliminated the cap, right? They've made exceptions to the spending cap. All of those things starting now to creep up property taxes in each one of our towns. That's why you're now over $10,000 on an average home. And that's going to continue. It's not going to stop.
It can be done.
It can be done.
It can be done, and I can evidence this. I was here 16 years ago when Governor Christie came in. The last Corzine budget was about $33.8 billion. When he left office, the night before Sonny died, they blew $258 million in Sonny died. Like our last night, 16 years ago, they spent that before Christie came in. He got in office within 3 weeks. By the end of January, he called us all into a special session. I remember it was snowing. We came driving down here, right? You were here, Eric. He cut $1 billion out of the last 5 months of that FY 2010 budget, and we survived. We got by. So if you ask all the department heads to start taking a certain percentage off, you can get some of that money back. We've had tremendous revenue growth over the past 8 years. There was a lot of organic revenue growth. Inflation pushes that too, not to mention. And we couldn't live within the organic revenue growth and not be spending as much as we are. Who increases spending 70% in 8 years? Seriously, that's exactly where we're at.
Did you find the governor's advice to the left side of the aisle, the Democratic side of the aisle, on the way out? Well, maybe you shouldn't spend beyond your means. That was his advice to the Democratic caucus. A little late to give that advice. The budget went up 70% under his administration, from $34 billion when I first came in 2017, 2018, to $60 billion now. He knows what's coming. The state is going to go over the fiscal cliff, so that's why he delivered that advice, and that's going to be for Governor Sherrill to deal with.
The governor told us that he thinks because of his administration that property taxes are no longer the #1 financial stressor for New Jersey taxpayers. Do you have
Really?
any thoughts on that claim?
Property taxes went down?
He just said he
Really?
doesn't think that people are as worried about
He
it.
could,
Well, I'm worried about energy more than property taxes, because if we don't have energy and summertime's come and we don't have air conditioning, there's going to be a lot of people in our state that are suffering for that.
It's all
I
But
can
about
tell
also,
you.
the spending is a problem. We've gone way overboard in spending. There's room to cut back. If you add up the $6 billion in the pensions and about $3 billion additional in his time here in school funding, that's legitimate. So other than cost of living, how did we get to $24 billion? How did we get to $24 billion? He could not handle the super progressives in either of the Democratic caucuses. It's a plain fact of the matter. They pushed a lot of this stuff over the finish line to negotiate him to sign off.
and there were simple things that could have been done. You know, when we adopted the legislation to fund the Transportation Trust Fund, the Democrats' proposal raised the gas tax to do that. Senator Tiver and I had a proposal that would have funded the Transportation Trust Fund, added money to New Jersey Transit, brought the transportation funding from 5 years to 8 years without a gas tax increase. I brought that to leadership in our House, and we gave it to the governor's office. We introduced the legislation. It was completely ignored. They said, no, we've already got a deal and we're going to increase the gas tax. You know, those are the type of things where you can begin to make some inroads if there was just some communications and some negotiations.
It's a little disingenuous for the governor to say, it's not just the property tax. The people are saying it's not just the property tax. It's everything I mentioned before. It's the property tax, it's the sales tax, it's the income tax, it's the business tax, it's the energy prices, it's New Jersey transit fares, it's New Jersey Turnpike tolls, it's Garden State Parkway tolls. I mean, it's all of the above. It's just this overwhelming feeling of unaffordability
It's death
in the
by
state.
it's death by
Right.
1,000 cuts.
They just answered how I was going to answer, so that's great. They just took it. That's fantastic.
And we all gave you a couple of numbers. I just gave you the 33.8 billion last, that was when Christie took over. And when Christie left, it was 34.5 billion, 750 million more in 8 years. And the clock kept going, the sun came up, and the state moved on. And he's gone up 24 billion in 8 years. There's room.
I think a statement like that is, I started out with saying that we need to be intellectually genuine. And the problem is, I think a statement like that from Governor Murphy on his way out the door shows you how out of touch he has been with the average New Jerseyan this entire time. You know, for the past 8 years. Again, sort of kowtowing to the radical left of his party, and it doesn't even matter whether it's in the Assembly or the Senate, but it's the folks on the street and the folks that are on social media saying, you know, we need justice. So what does that mean? Like, I see that all of the time. I see statements like this, these very broad statements. Well, I guess he's placated them, but the fact of the matter is the death of 1,000 cuts, what Senator Bucco talked about, is 100% of what's happening in this state. So maybe property taxes isn't their number one issue, because everything's an issue. You know, how much goods cost at your grocery store, how much it costs to put gas in your car, how much home repairs cost, permitting costs if you want to add on to your home. All of that stuff, I mean, we've become such an over-regulated state that costs so much to do anything. It has stifled real growth of our economy, and we've used tricks like all of the taxes to raise revenue, borrowing $4.6 billion. And you know, I have a real hard time listening to Governor Murphy talk about how many small businesses opened up during his administration when 1/3 of all of our small businesses shut their doors forever because of the COVID-19 restrictions that we had, when we were told it was going to be 14 days to flatten the curve and we have to follow the science. Well, other states seemed to be doing A-OK and had the same numbers as New Jersey had, or less numbers, like Florida, countries like Sweden, and well, they didn't have 1/3 of all of their small businesses close their doors forever. So, you know, again, I think it shows you how out of touch Governor Murphy has been with the average New Jerseyan.
Other than that, we like him as a guy.
What's that?
Nice guy, though.
Oh, yes, oh, yeah. Absolutely.
School facilities are in rough shape across the state. Any plans for the SDA or any thoughts about how the new governor should handle this?
I'd like to talk about that, because there's one particular school in my district that is emblematic of problems that have cropped up all over the state of New Jersey. You know, I heard Governor Murphy in his speech, Stronger and Fair, let's not forget that he said that a few times, that schools were fully funded. Dennis Township, my legislative district, Cape May County, cut their funding by 70% over a 5-year period. They've cut basic skills, they've cut extracurricular activities. Go tell Dennis Township that their school's Stronger and Fairer. There needs to be a whole lot done when it comes to the funding of our schools. And again, I don't want to upset Senator Teresa Ruiz, because I always bring up Newark, and if I say it 3 times, she'll magically appear. But you know, we send over $1 billion to Newark, and yet you have a school like Dennis Township that $1 million would make all the difference in the world, quite literally a drop in the ocean of a $59 billion budget, and the answer is, no, we can't afford it.
Yeah, and that's happening in school districts across New Jersey. I have a school district in my district. Jefferson Township is projecting a $4.6 million deficit in their upcoming budget. They're doing the same thing. They've sold schools. They've cut 100 of their staff. Class sizes are up to over 30. You know, they may be funding the school funding formula 100%, but it's clearly not working.
That's their opinion.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate it.
And if you guys need anything else, feel free to reach out, let us know, we can always help you out after the session. So, thank you everybody for showing up. Like I said,
Thank
let us know if you need anything else. Have a good night.
Thank you.
We talk about the 1,000 people that died.
Oh, no, I think that,